My name is Nalin Murjaria. I'm a psychologist based in UK. I've worked for a very, very long time as a parenting coach. I want to say a little bit about this particular session because this session is not a webinar. And the reason why it's different from a webinar is that when you finish the session today, you will have ideas or you will have insights on these three key areas. So how you create a responsible child. So it's an important thing. How do you make your child independent is a better way of describing it. So that's the first thing you will take away. So I'll give you ideas on how you can help your child become responsible. And obviously, responsibility is a big area. The other thing I want to talk about today is how you help your child navigate the world around them. Because remember, your child lives in three worlds, basically. It lives in your house. There is interaction going on there. And it's got to navigate itself in that area. So whether it's a boy or a girl, the interactions can be slightly different. Then your child has also got to navigate itself or himself or herself in the school setting. Because in the school, there are teachers, there are other students, there are subjects. So there is a lot going on there. And the third area that I want to look at is that how do you harness the power of your family? So here I want to talk about how the family helps you get success in your life. So these are the three areas in which I will cover the subject matter. So when you go away, you will have an idea about how to support your child, make a good go, and get success in these three areas. So when we talk about children having responsibility, what we are thinking of is that we want all our children to be self-directed. In other words, they're able to handle their own responsibilities, then they're able to handle responsibilities and themselves, even if you are not present. So in a school setting, you're not present. In a community setting, you're not always present. You might be present in some situations. And then how does your family values actually prepare your child for success and for self-protection? So I'll go into a lot more detail on it. So these are the three topics that I want to cover. So we're going from here to there. Okay, the story so far. So in other words, I want to tell you about the other sessions I've done so far. So basically what I've done so far is I've done 3 sessions. So this is session number 3. In session 1, what I did was I did this particular diagram. So if you haven't seen this, you can see it now. And if you want it, I can give you a copy of this. So basically here, what I've done is I've talked about your parenting journey with your child. So in other words, if you are bringing up a child, these are typical problems you will hit as a parent, and every parent hits them. So if you are a parent of a teenager, you will hit them. If you are a parent of a child who's got a diagnosed condition, you will hit them. And let me just quickly go through the issues you will hit. The first problem you will hit would be that the way you communicate with your child will actually help it grow or it will fight back. Then a child will automatically, because it's growing, make a lot of mistakes. And a lot of parents find this quite challenging. So if your child is talking back to you, if the child is not helping out in the house, they're not doing their chores, parents find it quite hard going. So therefore, this is an issue they need to resolve without, in a sense, getting too much into a conflict with the child, because majority of parents start shouting at the children, screaming at the children, criticizing the children, and so on and so forth. And in fact, instead of helping them, it actually pushes your children away from you. And I covered this in session 1. Then there are issues that you will come across, like, for example, screen time. A lot of children get addicted to screens. They're watching the screens, social media and friendships and all of these for hours and hours. And unfortunately, it tends to interfere with their daily success areas. So for example, it interferes with homework, it interferes with their interpersonal skills, it interferes with loads of areas which are essential for their long-term success. So this is a challenge that all parents have. And it's something that they need to be able to overcome. And in the session that I did, session 1, I talked about 7 key areas or 7 parenting skills that you can use in order to help your children get through these stages. Another area, which is the one we're going to cover today, is how you help your child become responsible, how you help your child become confident, and how you help your child practice family values so they can use those for their success. So today I'll go into a lot more detail on it. And the last area here is that a lot of parents actually find that their children are not doing well at school. A lot of them find it like that. And there are lots of issues related to it. Sometimes it's child related, sometimes it's school related. And we need to help our children try and aim for those A+ grades. So next week's session is actually going to be on that one. So how do we help children get those A+ grades, which are a bit elusive, quite hard to get? And then how do you help your children develop their talents? If your child has got, every child has got talent, but some children have got some talents which are obvious, and other children don't have talents which are that obvious, but you need to identify them. And if you can identify them, then the process I'm going to show you, you could use to bring out their talents so that they actually become good at what they ought to be. Natural ability. And it also gives them a chance to become a leader in their own field. And this is what gives them long-term success. So that is the session I did. And if you haven't seen it, I have put links on the WhatsApp group to direct you to them. And it's there on YouTube. So you can easily go and see it. So that, in a sense, covers session 1. And this is what I covered, your parenting journey and the kind of issues you'll come across it and the 7 core skills you can use in order to help your child. In session 2, which is what I did last week, I talked about how you connect with your child and how you create this tower of connection. Once you are on that tower of connection and it works well, you are able to help your children deal with loads of things. So for example, you can help your children deal with their challenging behavior and getting them to become more responsible simply by the way you communicate. So being on that tower of connection is very, very critical. Unfortunately, the tower of connection breaks down literally every day. And on session 2, I actually talk about how the tower of connection breaks down and what you need to do to recover the tower of connection, and sometimes also called the bridge of connection, so that you can start helping your children persistently. If you don't do this as a parent, then what will happen is you are starting to shortchange your children to a certain extent. And by doing that, what you are doing is you are helping them with these areas of their life. So for example, you're helping them with their confidence. And we call that, you're helping them keeping the cup full. You're helping them with the challenging behavior, how to transform the challenging behavior into responsible behavior. If your child is a bit spoiled, how to help them become responsible. If your child is a bit immature, how to help them become mature and make good decisions. If your child has got average emotional intelligence, how you help your child become highly emotionally intelligent so that they can also succeed, because emotional intelligence is even more important than IQ in getting success in today's life. And the last thing is, if your child is suffering anxieties of different sorts, unfortunately 7% of children suffer anxieties, you can use your connection with them to help them become good at managing their anxiety and become normal again, because anxiety holds you back. So that, in a sense, was the substance of session 2. So if you haven't seen it, I'll recommend you go and see it, because I have put the link of that in the WhatsApp group. And the last thing I want to talk about today is what we're going to do today. And I already said a little bit about it. So basically, we're talking about a responsible child, how to help your child become confident, and how you help your child gain those family values, which will actually help them become successful. That actually covers what I've done so far. And the 2 points that are worth making about that is that when I work with parents, generally what I tend to do is I tend to give them a workbook. I tend to give them online sessions, a lot of expert sessions where I actually teach them what to do. And by doing that, I can help them build the skills to connect with the child, help them develop independence, and help them get the success they actually need in their life. So that's basically what I do. And the last point that is worth making is that if you're asking, is this session for you? Then this is session for you. If you are worried about your child and if they've got challenging behavior, and that is what is worrying you. The second thing is if you've got teenagers and they are kind of going through their roller coaster ride and you're worried about that, or if you've got a child who's got diagnosed condition. So the kind diagnosed conditions I'm thinking of are things like ADHD, autism. There are other conditions as well. And if you want to help your child get the best out of their situation and their life, then this is actually for you. So this says enough about what I've done so far for the participants. Let me say one more thing about today's session. In today's session, we'll spend 70 minutes on my presentation, and I'll open it up for question and answer. So you can ask me questions so that, I can give you parenting type of answers for that. Okay, so that says enough about what we have done so far. I'll say a little bit about myself. So it gives you a flavor of what kind of work I've done in the past. So this is more like my portfolio, so to speak. So it gives you a flavor of what I've done in the past and how I've supported parents. So the first thing is that I started my journey, parenting coaching journey, in 1987, when I just qualified as a psychologist from a London university. And what happened at that time was I was working for a local authority, and we were working for the foster carers department. And one of the things that foster carers asked me to do is that they say to me, Nalin, can you actually devise a course for us which helps us settle children in our family, because they are taking difficult children into their family who come from difficult backgrounds. So I devised a course for them, which was fairly straightforward, that get a new child by Saturday. So here we're talking about a child who has got a different attitude to your family, different behavior to your family. They've grown up in a different environment and they've got a different character. And you want to help them settle in your family so that they can begin to progress with their life, because their parents have not been able to do it for them so far. So this is basically for both short-term carers and long-term carers. Now, this course became quite a good success. It was a brilliant success. So therefore, they asked me to do a similar course for teenagers. So I devised a course for them, how to get a new teen by Saturday. And here we are working with, again, children who are coming from families which are quite difficult circumstances, and they are mouthy, they're moody, they are not that respectful of everyone around them, they are playing up in school and so on. And these foster carers are supposed to look after them. And the idea basically was, if they put the parenting strategy that I described in this course in their own home, then they will be able to actually help the children out. Now, let's imagine those children are settled. And what happened was the foster carers asked me to do a third course. And again, this was also a brilliant success. And what they wanted was that they wanted to teach their own children, as well as children they've taken into their family, how to learn all the family skills, all the skills of success in schools and so on, and how to progress in their life. So basically, I devised a course for them, which is called 21 Days to a Happy Family. And the idea basically was children get integrated in the family, they begin to learn from the family, and they begin to transform themselves and become successful in their own life. But one thing that was missing so far was what they asked me to do next, because they wanted their children, and all these children, remember, it's all their children as well as foster children they've taken into their family, to start becoming good students. And I did research on this area, and I actually found that if you teach your children right brain skills, because majority of people learn from their left brain, and that's one of the reasons why they're not very good at remembering stuff, they're not good at doing exams, they're not good at being able to revise very well, because if you use your left brain, basically you forget 95% of what you've learned. So I showed them how to use the right brain techniques to begin to learn better, how to use their memory for habit such as study habits and stuff like that, how to plan to get A's, and how to do exams so that they can actually succeed in getting A's. So this is basically what I was doing for a very long time. And then because the courses were doing well, the foster carers say to me, Nalin, we are having to attend so many days. Instead, can you come up with one course which covers everything? So again, I sat down and I devised the new course, and that is what is called the Empowering Parenting course, which is the one that I've been training here. And here, what I did was I actually showed them the key strategies they need to use, when they connect with their children, when they become coaches for the children. So in other words, I call that the compass skills. And then how to enable your children to actually be self-motivated to get A grades and get into their talent and actually make the most of it and become leaders. So I tend to call them the competence skills. So these are the kind of things I've done so far. So it gives you a flavor of my background. And if there is anyone who feels some of these problems are there in their own parenting, then they can contact me and then I can support them. For people who've attended these courses, because I did these for a lot of carers, they gave me kind of feedback like, this was a great course, then every parent must attend, and then eye-opening course to know how to do things. So because we were looking at the whole range of parenting strategies that people can actually use. So that says a little bit about me. So basically, as parents, all of us really want our children to be responsible, and we want them to be independent as well. And what it does is, it does a number of things. One of the things it does is, when your children are responsible, basically you just can delegate their life to them. You don't have to teach them anything new. So for example, if your children are responsible for self-care, for sake of argument, you think about daily life, cleaning their teeth and putting clothes on themselves and getting ready for school and so on. You don't have to do it for them, because your job is to just enable so that they can get to that stage of performance. If they're, for example, in the school and they are responsible for interpersonal skills of how to make friends and how to work with other children and so on and so forth, how to work with teachers and how to gain a lot. Again, if they can do it well, then you don't have to teach them. They're now becoming self-sufficient. So the whole purpose of responsibility is that the child becomes responsible, their life becomes easier, and you can also keep on delegating the responsibility for them. And as time goes on, they take on more and more and more responsibility. Now, later on, I'll talk about the areas of responsibility that you can think of when you think about children. So basically, we want our children to be able to run their own life in a responsible way in 3 key areas. So one of them is daily life. So self-care, things like that. And then we're talking about school. So we're talking about doing their homework, being part of projects and things that the school runs, participate in their own learning, become a self-developer. And in the community and in the relationships that, in a sense, you conduct in the community. So, for example, going to your, let's say, somebody's wedding, or going to a religious function, or going somewhere for fun, like going on holiday and things like that. So you can take a little bit of backseat if your children are responsible. So for example, if they're able to swim and they can take responsibility for swimming, then they can swim in a public swimming pool. But you might still need to supervise them if they're going in the sea, because the sea is a bit unpredictable. So now let's just go a little bit into a little bit more detail on responsibility. The key thing is, when research has been done on how parents enable their children to become responsible, some of the results they found are quite worrying. So the first result they found is that a lot of parents, although they want their children to be responsible, they actually hijack their responsibility. So I'll tell you how this happens. So the first way in which parents hijack their children's responsibility, or basically stop them from growing, is they experience anxiety. So I'll give you an example of that. Let's say your child has got to do a project for their school and they are struggling with it. As a parent, you yourself start feeling anxious, and then some parents will even end up doing it for them. I went to a science fair fairly recently, And when I looked at all the projects that children had done there, and look at the ones that were doing well and so on and so forth, and when I was asking them how well did they do it, I found that majority of children who were doing well, they had support from their parents. And I didn't want to kind of dig a little bit deep into it, but I was concerned they actually helped them learn and do the project, or did the parents actually end up doing the project for them? So there is a lot of anxiety parents experience. So for example, if your child is not able to do their homework, some parents actually end up doing the homework for them. If a child is struggling with their room, for example, they can't clean their room, right, or keep their room dirty, then parents actually struggle with it for a little while and just go and do it. So instead of helping the child learn how to do it, they end up doing it. And in the process, they stop the child developing responsibility. So that is one of the things that stops children developing responsibility and becoming independent. Another thing that stops children learning responsibility is the parents' tolerance levels. So in other words, if a child wants to climb a tree, the parents get worried, oh, they'll fall down and so on. But if you look at the child and the way they're climbing the tree, you do find that the children are always risk assessing all the time. And I've seen children, when they're climbing, they're actually checking, is this safe or not, etc., etc. You might want to supervise them a little bit, but if you interfere too much, slowly, you're basically undermining their ability to do things for themselves. So that's an example. I come across two projects which I think I want to recommend to you. One of them is called Anji Play. And then there are projects in America where basically they allow children to take a lot of responsibility and for learning for themselves. So for example, they do a lot of DIY projects. And in that particular school, what they do is they even allow children to have access to tools like hammer and nails and all of that. And although first time when the child starts nailing something, they might hurt themselves a little bit. Sooner or later, they actually learn how to handle a hammer. And when you go to that school, you are surprised what the children are able to do. They're able to do maths without too much interference from parents because they've been given a project where learning maths becomes a key thing to become successful. And children just learn it by themselves. Amazing how much they can do. One thing they did there, which is quite interesting, is they did a little kind of experiment, and I talked about it in session 2 as well. That they had a toy which does about, I think, 12 functions. And they gave the toy to one group of people and a group of children, and they say to them, children, this toy can squeak when you press it here. They gave the toy to the children. After a little while, the children kind of squeaked it and got bored. And after a little while, they just left the toy. With another group of people or another group of children, they said to the children, this toy does a lot of things, and we want to find out from you what you think it can do. Then they gave the toy to the child or to children, and they found that these children were able to find all the 12 functions the toy had and other functions that even the designers hadn't thought of. They showed them how this toy can do things which even the designers hadn't thought of. So can you see, when you have tolerance for risks, for just allowing children to learn, right, just give them a little bit of overall guidance, they actually do very well. So children were much more cleverer than adults when it came to learning. So it's just amazing. The third thing that parents do, which undermines their ability to be self-directing or learning responsibility, is parents start making decisions for their child in loads of areas. They have not fully kind of looked at what the child's abilities really are. So for example, if you think about education, sports, relationships, parents are making decisions for the child. And in the process, they're undermining the child to actually learn things for themselves. So what I would say is that when parents suffer anxiety or lack of tolerance for risks or hijack decision-making, then they're stopping their children from being responsible for themselves. Yeah, very, very important. Some of you may have already heard this story about a caterpillar, that there was a caterpillar in a cocoon trying to get out so that it can become a butterfly. Person was observing it and started feeling sorry for the caterpillar. So what it did was He actually helped the caterpillar by cutting the cocoon a little bit so the caterpillar can actually come out. When the caterpillar come out, it failed to become a butterfly because it did not have enough blood in its wings in order for it to fly. So this example or this story actually tells you that if you stop your children from doing the struggle that is necessary to learn a particular skill, then you as a parent are undermining your child. Now, later on, as we go on, I want to show you what that struggle really means. Now, the question basically is, how do you help children? And the answer to that is that if you want to help children, then the best way you can help children is by removing powerlessness in their environment. And I'll explain this in a minute. So let me give you an example. Let's imagine, so I'll first of all start with you. Let's imagine you are working in your office, one day, or you are working on your desk. And your line manager sends you a message saying, can I see you at 3 o'clock? Once you get that message, is it possible to carry on working and concentrating on what you are doing? What would be your answer to that? When research has been done on that particular issue, what they found is that if you are working and if you're slightly, just a younger age or something, not experienced enough in your life, then what tends to happen is you start worrying. When you start worrying, what happens to you is what we in the literature call, you start thinking negatively. You start thinking like, oh, why is this manager asked to see me? Have I done anything wrong? What is going on in this organization? So one of the things you start worrying about is all the things that could have potentially gone wrong. The next thing that happens is that you start feeling uncertain. You think, has my project gone wrong? Do you think they're going to tell me off for it? You feel uncertain about what you've done. You, in fact, the third thing you feel is you feel threatened a little bit. You think, are they going to tell me off? Will they sack me from my job? And you start feeling insecure. Now, in literature, we tend to call this the nuts phenomena. In other words, you start thinking negatively, you start feeling uncertain, you start feeling you're under threat, and you start feeling you're not secure. Now, think about a child's life. Let's just apply this to a child's life. Do children feel helpless like this, as if they're worried about things all the time? And chances are that if you are a family where parents, in a sense, are very, very reactive, they are scrutinizing everything a child does, then the chances are that children actually feel they are in nuts. And in school and in all sorts of places, we put children in a very, very helpless situation. So, for example, we give them a timetable that we're going to teach you maths. On the day that you give them a timetable and it says at 3 o'clock, I'll teach you maths, and the teaching actually starts, a lot of children actually feel that incompetent. They feel worried. Oh, am I going to be able to learn this very well? If I can't learn, will my parents tell me off? So parents actually put children in situations where they actually feel powerless all the time. If they go out to, let's say, a family gathering, they don't know how to behave. And if they do something, they get told off all the time, or they go to a public place. Let's say, for example, a religious place. They don't know how to behave, and they get told off. They don't know what to do. So you take them to a restaurant, they're running around because they don't know how to sit and contain themselves. So in a lot of instances, we ask children to do things where they don't know what to do and they totally feel powerless. And unfortunately, when children feel powerless, they actually go into their defense mechanism. We tend to call it, it activates the lion. They start fighting you back. When that happens, they're no longer learning, they're just worried. So the important thing is that if you want to help your children to become responsible, you need to develop an empowering framework. And the definition of an empowering framework is, if you want them to do anything, you get them to recognize what they need to do and teach them how to do it successfully. So I'll give you a simple example. I had a child who was going to get kicked out of his school bus because the driver was saying that I can't manage this child. Just difficult to manage this child. So I can't drive the bus and manage this child. So the problem was given to me. So I talked to the child and I say to the child, when you're in the bus, right, how long is your journey? He says it's very, very long. My journey is very long. And I get bored. So I say to the child, let us find an activity which you can do on your bus so that your boredom actually decreases. And we will choose an activity, or maybe 2 or 3 activities, which will allow you to keep yourself busy. So I worked with a mother. We worked out a set of activities which can be put in a bag, and the child can carry it in the bus. And it's easy to fold up and take it out of the bus and bring it back in. Once the activity program was put in place, in other words, once we made the child competent at managing their time, it became easy for the bus driver to actually drive the bus without worrying about the child whatsoever. So when you find your child is playing up, or when you find that there are difficulties your child is experiencing, let's say even at school or wherever, if you create an environment in which they can learn, you will be surprised how good the children can become. And till date, we haven't received a single complaint from the bus driver about this child. In fact, they love the child. The approach we use, the approach I'm describing about how you train your child to be responsible. First of all, so the stage 1 is you create the name for what you want the child to do. So in this case, it was the child needs to handle their boredom. Okay, so that's the name we gave it, right? And then we create a mechanism by which they can actually handle the boredom. So if, say, for example, you want your children to learn maths, you need to name what type of maths they need to learn. They need to learn additions. And then you start doing additions in their daily life. You can say, oh, I've got 2 elephants here and there are 2 elephants there. How many elephants do you think that makes? And the child initially will not be clear what to say to you. They'll say, oh, 5, they'll say 3, whatever the number they say. You can say, well, that's a good go. It is 4, and then you show them how you make it 4. So in other words, you start out by first of all helping the child, handle what I call unconscious incompetence. So what it basically means is, so let me give you an example. Let us say, for sake of argument, a child sees somebody riding a bicycle. What do you think they're thinking in their brain? They're thinking, give me a bicycle and I can ride. Because they think it is easy. Am I making sense? So that is what we call unconscious incompetence stage. In other words, the child doesn't know it can ride the bicycle, but it thinks it can ride the bicycle. Am I making sense? That is stage 1 of learning. So you recognize you want to do something, but you think you can do it. Then what happens is you give the child a bicycle. And what do you think will happen? They go on the bicycle and they will fall. Yeah, so that is stage 2 of learning. Right? So we call that conscious incompetence. So they now realize they can't ride a bicycle yet. Then you create a system. So that is what I did with the child. That, for example, the child was bored in the bus. And when you give it an activity, so for example, these are the activities you do when you're on the bus. It starts doing an activity, but again, after a little while, even the activity can become boring. So we need to show the child how to carry on with the activity so that it becomes successful and they can spend 40 minutes doing it. So the same applies to learning a bicycle. Now you teach the child by holding the shuttle how to balance and how to push the paddles so that it can start riding the bike. So that is called conscious competence. It's learning step by step by step. And after a little while, you will find the child will be able to ride the bicycle by themselves. So that is called the unconscious competence. In other words, if you create an environment in which You take the child through 4 stages in any area of their life. So for example, it might be you teaching the child how to brush their teeth. So initially they see you brushing the teeth and they think it's easy. You give them a brush, they try and do it and they find it hard going. Okay, so they've gone through 2 stages. Then you show them, okay, this is how you step by step brush your teeth. And then once the teeth are brushed, this is how you check that your teeth are clean. And if they're not clean, you do a few more gargles in order to make it clean. Am I making sense? So you can break any task down into 4 stages and you can teach the child how to do it systematically. Once you can do this, name the area of responsibility and turn it into 4 stages. We call it the 4 C's. Your child will start learning and becoming independent. Same thing, if they can't tie their shoelace, same thing applies. So the 4C model is what we recommend. And in fact, that is the one that is recommended by just about any psychologist that I can think of who has been trained in how to help children manage themselves, right, and become responsible. So basically, if you want to become a very, very successful parent who is able to make their children independent, then that is what you need to consider. And if you want to learn how to do it, then what I would suggest to you is arrange a time to talk to me and we will work out a strategy that you need for your child so that you can help your child become responsible, right? And remember, we will use those 4 stages. And we'll make sure you're not making the 2 mistakes I talked about. One is experiencing anxiety, so you hijack their responsibility, and you don't put them into nuts. So you create a climate where a child is able to learn. Okay. When you say time management, here we're talking about time management to do different things, isn't it? Like their homework and getting to school on time and then doing things in such a way that their life actually functions well. And the issue is, in time management, the biggest issue is distractions. They're doing something and a friend calls and they get distracted. And after that, they don't know what to do. So when I teach time management strategies to children, I actually show them how they can become very, very productive by being able to also handle distractions. So now let's go to the next topic. The next topic basically is, how do you help your child become confident? Very, very important. Because you see, you can have a child at home and you think they're succeeding well, but unfortunately, they've got to function in the world around them. So let me start by giving you some scenarios where your child actually does need to become functional. So let's imagine that your child gets invited to their best friend's party and they do not want to go because they don't know, or they don't have the skills to make friends. How are you going to help them become confident to actually make friends and function in that party? Yeah, so that's an example. See, so a child can be talking to you, but in a party, they'll just end up in a corner because they don't know how to make friends. So that's an example. Let me give you another example. Another example is that your child has volunteered to help out in the school fete. So let's say, in UK, we have a lot of fetes, which are activities to raise funds for the school. And what happens is, because your child has volunteered, they give your child a list of things to do. And your child reads the list and thinks, oh my God, there's too many things to do, but they don't know how to say no, so they end up with a tummy ache. How do you help your child become confident and negotiate that situation? Am I making sense? So let me give you a third example. The third example would be that your child is doing a placement at a local hospital. So let's say you've got a teenager and your child is doing a little placement at a local hospital. And before they went for the placement, you told your child that, look, your sister requires some help to do their homework. So when you finish your placement today, come and help her. So she's agreed. But when she's at the hospital, the line manager, the person who's supervising them, tells them that today they are very, very busy and they want your child to do 2 hours more. So now she's trapped. How is she going to help the sister do the homework? So how can your child be confident in dealing with the line manager there? Am I making sense? Because you're dealing with an adult who you think has got more power in things. Let's go to another example. Let's say your child is walking down the street and some bicycle people pass her. On the street, they stop her and they say, "You ugly bag." They call her ugly. They call her all sorts of names. And the child comes home crying. How are you going to help them work that through? Another thing is, let's say your child has bought a brand new toy from a local shop. And when the child comes home, you look in the bag that they were carrying the toy, and you find the toy that has been packed is broken. How are you going to help your child confidently return it? Another area that I'm thinking of is, let's say your child is maybe 14-year-old and she's got a younger sister. The younger sister borrowed their t-shirt and gave it back to them, but it's not properly washed. How is your child going to handle it? Because if you start fighting and so on, creating an argument, then the relationship is actually put at risk. And let me do the 7th example. Your child has done some homework and they've done it to the best of their advantage, the best of their skills. Now they hand it into their school and the teacher gives it F grade and hands it back to them. How will you help your child work that through? So can you see that if your child doesn't have this inner confidence, all these things can put pressure on your child and start breaking your child down? So if I were to say to you, you need to help your child become confident, how can you go about doing it? Let's go to the situation where somebody's called your child a name. What I would suggest is you need to give them a good process. I'll tell you what. Say, for example, let's say it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and the children went past her and they say, "It is night. Do you see? It is night. Go home." When your child comes home, what do you think the child is thinking? This is silly. It's not night, it's day. Do you think the child can stand on their feet and say, "No, it is not night, it's actually day"? Because they have information about themselves which validates them. So they know that it's day, so that's valid information for them. They are not going to shift because they've got valid information. So what you need to do is you need to build a process and say something like, everybody carries their own beauty. So you give them that framework. Then you can say to her, in your mind, what makes you beautiful? So she said, "I've got lovely eyes. The way I walk is very nice. I come across very dynamic. My friends love me." So you can see, yeah, that is fantastic. So basically, are you going to believe the opinion of some silly boys? So internally you say, "No, I won't believe it because I've got beautiful eyes. I walk very well." Yeah. Can you see? So you build the confidence by helping them get a framework that automatically gives them rights. They think, yeah, I think like that, so I believe I'm beautiful. It's very important that when your child feels lack of confidence, you are able to build confidence skills inside them. And the definition of a confidence skill is you give them a framework which actually gives them a platform to operate. Okay, in this case, it is you giving them a platform, like everybody's got their own beauty. That is the platform. So if you take each and every example, you can help your child identify the platform from which they need to take action. So I give you a simple example. Let us say your child gets invited to the best friend's party and they do not want to go because they don't know how to talk. Yeah, they don't know how to make friends. So what platform can you use to help them become confident about it? What platform can you use? Creating a friendship is a skill. So the way I can make you a friend is very easy. So first thing I've got to do is I've got to connect with you. So in other words, for example, if I want to make friends with you, I can come near you and I can say to you, "Oh, my name is Nalin. What is yours?" Can you see? Yeah. I can start a conversation. And you can say, "Oh, my name is Beena." And I can say, "Oh, that's a lovely name. Beena, where are you from?" So if I start a conversation, you do a small conversation, and then you can continue the conversation. So you can say, "Oh, Beena, which school do you go to? Is it a nice school? What do they teach you which you like? Can you see? So now I'm getting you to converse with me. And the more I appreciate you, if I say to you, oh, that's nice, that's lovely, that's great, you slowly start liking me. That is what creates friendship. So not only have you got to be fearless, you've also got to be interested in the other people. The more interested you are in the other people and you ask them questions, the easier it becomes for them to become your friends. Friendship is a process. And then what happens is that once you become friends, sometimes you have an argument. So you need to learn how to resolve an argument. You need to be able to listen. And if it's your fault, you got to be able to say sorry. If it's their fault, you can say, okay, I can let you off on this occasion. You still maintain your friendship. So you've learned how to do it. Or if somebody stops talking to you, and they've been your friend in the past, you learn how to repair a relationship. I'm saying these are all confidence skills. So you can give a person some framework where to build their internal confidence. You can give a child communication framework. And there are 7 skills involved in communication framework, by the way, just in case you're wondering, where am I going with this? There are 7 skills. So the first skill is how you engage a person. The next skill is how to ask things so that they can have a conversation with you. Then you need to have what I call a two-way conversation. You need to show interest in them, ask questions and stuff. And you need to also learn how to bring the conversation to a close. So you can say, it was lovely talking to you, Bina. I'm going to go and get a drink for myself. Would you like one? Yeah, and if the person says no, then you can say, nice talking to you. I'll have a drink and I'll come back and chat, find you later on. That way, you can actually start making friends. And then later on, what will happen is that person will remember you. They'll say, oh, she talked to me at the party. She's a very nice person. So the key thing is that whenever your child feels lack of confidence, there are skills that you need to build inside them. And once you build their skills, they automatically can navigate their way. So the navigation would be that, say, for example, let's say your child has got that toy and the toy is broken in the bag and you have to return it. How could you do it? So what is the framework you can use that? The answer is called rights. That when you buy something, you have a right to receive it whole. If I pay for a service, I have a right to receive the full service. So that, in a sense, is the third framework of building confidence, that there are times when you need to build a child's rights. So you can say, okay, you bought this toy, it's broken. All right, that's a fact. But the thing that you can make this toy become new again is by going there and saying to the shopkeeper, sir, I bought this and I found this was broken. Can you please exchange it for me? Because you have a right to receive a full toy. And if the person says no, right, you have a right to report them to the authorities and get them to give you the full toy. So you need to learn how to become assertive at 2 levels. One is with the shopkeeper, and the next layer is with authorities. If your child learns this, I can tell you, as they grow older, they'll become a very, very good advocate for themselves. So building confidence is a very, very important skill that parents need to have, because the more you can build their confidence, the more independent they become. They get a voice, they're able to deal with comments, they're able to deal with loads of things, which otherwise, for a lot of children, is quite stressful. If somebody calls you a name like, oh, you are a dirty, ugly bag, you don't want that to be the message that the child carries away. You want the child to be able to bounce back from it. So the whole idea of confidence is, the more you build your confidence in a child, the more they're able to bounce back and function well in society without feeling distressed by it. So now what I want to do is, I want to show you a summary of all the different frameworks you need as a parent to build a strong, confident child. So these are the kind of frameworks we need to be teaching our children in order to build them to become powerful, because we want our children to be powerful, isn't it? And the more powerful they are, the better it is for them, because then you can leave them on their own in the school and they will function. They will come out flying. They will land on their feet. That's the English way of describing it. Because they think about a cat. When a cat jumps from a very big height, always land on his feet, because it's got that suspension power. So that's what I would say to you, that
Thank
really
you.
to build confidence is easy if you know what framework you are using. I want to show you all the frameworks, by the way, before you go. So the first framework is rights and responsibilities. Remember, this is a framework where you have a relationship with someone, like, for example, buying, selling relationship. You have rights and they have responsibilities to you. Then we talked about the other framework, which was when you communicate, you shall ask and you will receive. So, for example, if you don't have friends, learn to ask somebody to become your friend and they will become friends. And then if there is a conflict, you need to learn to work through conflict. So, for example, if somebody's got a poor opinion of you, you build your internal strength to break that poor conflict. Can you see? So if you use just these three frameworks, I think your children can become very, very powerful. And I can show you up the internet and show you all the answers. Or you can join a course that we run on helping children become confident. And I'll show you how your children can become literally 100% confident in different scenarios. And we are even talking about, because I get a lot of children who've got conditions like ADHD and autism and so on. Their confidence is very, very poor. And the idea basically is we teach them ways in which they can become confident with and without your help, because there are times when they may actually ask a brother or a sister for help. And even your brother or sister, your family, should be able to build their confidence. That's the way we teach them, so that, your whole family exudes confidence. That's what you want. So if I were to break it down into skills, the first skills basically is self-confidence. So you have a foundation by which you operate. So the example of everybody is beautiful in their own ways. Self-confidence. How confident, how beautiful are you is basically just building their internal confidence. So that's skill number one. Skill number two is rights and responsibilities. That, for example, if you buy something, you have a right to expect it to be perfect. So buying a toy, for example, or buying a watch or buying whatever. The third thing is that if somebody is in a conflict with you, so for example, let's say your child is doing that project and the line manager is saying, oh, can you do some extra hours? And she's got to come home early. How does she say no? Do you know how to say no? Different ways of saying no. One way of saying no is, sorry, I can't do it. That's a direct way of saying no. Another way of saying no to someone is, you can say, you agree with them first. I'd love to do these extra hours, but unfortunately, so you use words in English which are rubbers, which give you a chance to say no. And so unfortunately, my mom has given me some responsibilities which I need. My mom has told me to look after my son, my brother. Unfortunately, so you can use unfortunately, but sadly, so you can use terms like that in order to say no to a person. So if my friend says to me, Nalin, can you come to the cinema with me? And I know that I've got responsibilities for my child. I can say to you, I'd love to come to the cinema with you. However, my child is at home on his own and I've got to look after him. So they understand your priorities are different. So there are different ways of saying no. So the first way is direct. The second way is you agree with them and then rub it out by saying unfortunately, however, sadly, things like that. The third way of saying no is to actually say to the person, if you were in my position, what would you say? So you can say, I understand you need me to do these extra hours. If you were in my position, what would you do? So you make the other person understand your situation and get them to stand in your feet. So there are different ways of saying no. And the next thing is that you teach your child how to communicate. The way I talked to you about how you get them to make friendships? Teach them communication skills. And the last one is that if you need to negotiate, sometimes, let's say, for example, your child goes back and they've got a broken toy, you can say, if you can't give me the broken toy, then just refund my money. I'll be happy with that. You give them an option. Because if the shopkeeper doesn't have a toy, what can they do? They've got to refund your money. So you need to have a plan B. And by doing that, you can confidently still get a solution, although it might not be the perfect solution. So these are the different frameworks through which you can just build your child's confidence to a degree where they feel, yes, I can live a happy life. Now, the next thing I want to show you is, or how your family can help your child become successful. Very, very successful. So here, what I want to do is, I want to actually start out by some research that was done by Harvard University. So the first thing I want to say is that there is research that is still continuing today. We tend to call it Harvard Research on Family. Basically, what they found is that when you think about families, family is a very, very powerful mechanism by which children actually learn skills which make them successful. So I'll give you an example of that. So an example of that is, and this is actually a true story. A friend of mine, his name is Martin. What happened with Martin is, one day he went to school to collect his daughter. The daughter is a teenager. So the daughter looked very upset. So anyway, they got into the car and Martin started saying, so let's give her a name, right? So let's call her Cindy. So he said to Cindy, you don't look good today. What's the matter? So he says, Dad, I'm really upset today. So he said, why are you upset? She said, the reason why I'm upset is that my friends had a party 2 weeks ago and they didn't invite me. So the dad said, oh, okay. Right? And then she said, they didn't invite me because of you. So, she attacked him, right? So he then said, oh, why didn't they invite you? So she said, oh, my friends think that you wouldn't have approved of the party, that they didn't. That's the reason why they didn't invite me. So Martin then got the idea. So he thought, let me ask her a few questions. So he said to her, says, Cindy, tell me, is it a party where teenagers were present and they had access to a lot of drinking? A lot of beer and a lot of whiskey and wine and things like that. So is this a sort of party where people were drinking kind of all of these things? And she says, yeah, Dad, it's that type of party. And then he said, oh, all right. So that says a little bit. He says, tell me a bit more. Is this a sort of party where if somebody wanted to get close to you, they will say to you, why don't we go upstairs and spend some time together so that we can feel close? Is this sort of party where that would have happened a lot? And she said, yeah, that would have happened. And then he said, is this a sort of party where in order to feel good, some people would be using drugs like marijuana and so on? And she said, yeah. So he said, yeah, they are right. I wouldn't approve a party like that. But would you have liked to go to the party? So he asked her that question. So she said, no, I wouldn't have liked to go to the party either. So he said, why not? He says, because of our family rules. That, wherever you go, you are responsible for yourself and you should protect yourself. You shouldn't get high or you shouldn't get so drunk that, people can take advantage of you. So he said, in that case, do you want to change the family rules? She said, no. So he said, why not? He says, because they protect me. So can you see, although she was upset, she was okay about her family rules. So do you want your children to actually practice family rules which allow them to actually do well in their life? So how many, just give me your answer to that. Let's hear what you would say. What would you think is a good idea? Do you want your children to create rules like that where your family actually teaches them how to function well in the community? In this case, it's a party, but there could be other instances like it could be a church event, it could be a family event, it could be a school event. And the answer is yes, definitely. Because which parent wants to put their children at risk? No one. Unfortunately, our children don't fully understand it all the time, though. So if you want to create that kind of an environment, then your family is the best place to do it. Now, I want to show you what a family teaches. So let me ask you a question. Your family, what does it teach your children? Make a list of things that you think your family actually teaches your children. Let me tell you a bit more. So let me just tell you what research actually shows, which will give you a good idea. Here is responsibility. So one of the things a family teaches you is how to get on with others, which is something we discussed earlier on. That a family teaches you how to form a relationship. It teaches you how to maintain a relationship. Think about it this way. Would you teach your children how to maintain a good relationship between brothers and sisters, between parents? And it teaches you that, doesn't it? It teaches you how to sustain a relationship. It teaches you how to repair a relationship. It teaches you how to say no in a relationship. For example, if you don't want your children to do certain things, like if you don't want them to buy a toy, or it teaches them that, isn't it? That there are times, you will hear no. Am I making sense? There are times when it teaches you that this is not something we can afford. It teaches you how to set boundaries. But think about this. How many things does a family actually teach a child? Loads of things. The key thing is, we as a family, if you make that into a systematic way of teaching, your family can become a powerful mechanism, help your children become successful. Now, let me share an example with you. So the example is very, very simple. What happened was, this is like a famous example, which I've used in the past as well. Let me share a screen. And I tend to call this example the example of respect. Example of respect. What happened was, I don't know if this story is true or not, but I heard it from a friend of mine. So Mr. Ford, you remember Ford cars? Everybody knows Ford cars. So Mr. Ford was looking for some engineers to join his company. So what he did was he put an advert out, and then he shortlisted people. And he shortlisted 2 people, final people, who he was thinking of appointing. Both were good enough. In other words, both were highly qualified. They could both do the job. They could both of them be very good for the company because they would bring in prestige and so on and so forth. So he couldn't decide how to appoint people. So he invited them for a meal. So 2 of them. So they came for a meal, and they had a nice meal. And at the end of the meal, he shook the hands of one of the people and said, "It was nice having you, nice having a meal with you, but I'm not going to appoint you today. I wish you all the best for your job." And with the other one, he said, "It's nice having you for a meal. Thank you for coming. I'm going to take you on board and welcome to Ford." So the first one basically got upset. He says, "Mr. Ford, during this meeting, we didn't discuss the job at all. And I actually feel upset that, without knowing what my skills and abilities are, you've appointed this guy." So Mr. Ford said, "Do you want to know why I'm saying what I'm saying to you?" So he said, "Yes, sir." So he said, when you were having your meal, I was observing you and observing this person as well. When you had your meal, you put salt on your steak before you ate it. The other person tasted it, then put salt on his. So he said, if you think about it, I was looking at Ford and I was thinking, at Ford, who do we like? Do we like people who actually make changes without thinking, or they actually make a change after tasting something, after trying something out? And at Ford, we actually prefer people who try things out before they make changes. And that actually helps the company. But there is another reason. The other reason why I didn't select you is because throughout the meal, you talked to me and you were very polite and you were very good. When you look at the other person, he was also polite to me. But one thing he did, which you didn't do, is when people came to serve him, he smiled at them, He thanked them for their service, and he appreciated what they did for him. You didn't pay a single bit of attention to them. You only paid attention to me. And he says, that shows this person has got respect for other people. And at Ford, we appreciate everyone because they all make a contribution as a team to our success. So he says, does that tell you why you are not suitable for this job? So the person said, went and shook the other person's hand and said, congratulations. And then he realized that these are the values he'd learned at home. Respect. And without respect, you cannot succeed in life. Because without respect, do you think your friends are going to be friends for you a long time? Without success, do you think your colleagues are actually going to be supportive of you if you are a team leader for a long time? No. So the key thing is, if you don't learn respect and actually practice it on a regular basis, your chances of success actually goes down. So can you see how the Harvard research pinpointed family as the key resource from which everybody can learn things which will be successful in their life? So these two examples, the story of Cindy, where her family values protected her from basically maybe any risks that she had. And the second example of these two candidates, how families can actually help your children become successful. What additional things do you think you can learn from your family? So we've talked about respect. We've talked about basically safeguarding or protecting yourself. What other things do you learn from your family? There's one additional thing which people learn from the family, which is difficult to learn from anywhere else, unless you did a very, very specialized course. And all of you have the opportunity to teach this to your children. Any third skill that you can think of? The third thing basically is that it teaches you how to resolve conflicts. For example, your children, if you think about your siblings, if you just bought one toy for them, do you think they're going to fight who plays first and who plays second and all of this? Do you think they're going to argue, oh, you're being treated well by the parent and I'm being treated badly? So it will happen. What families teach you is how to resolve conflict in a successful way. So if you are a good parent and you are able to help your children learn how to understand conflict and resolve it in a way which is win-win. In other words, you can say to your child, okay, once you played your toy, you can allow your brother or sister to play with it. And they will say, yeah, that's okay. So you can come out with a win-win. You can come out with different ways in which they can resolve conflicts so that everybody has a good time. So conflict resolution and working out win-win solutions is one thing you can learn, which you can't learn from anywhere else. Unless you attend a course, like the course that people like me attended when I was at university on how to negotiate and how to basically get win-win outcomes in any situation. Now, these are the kind of skills that a family teaches you. Now, the way we teach how family values actually work is we actually list all the different skills that you're going to require in order to become successful and how you learn them in a family context and how you can systematically teach these to your children. How many of you think that would be a good thing to learn? Now, I've got some answers here. Like, for example, one of the things people learn is honesty. What is honesty? How do you know somebody's honest? One way you can know is if they keep their word. If they promise you something and they keep to it, you'd say this person is honest. True? Another thing is that even if you don't ask for it, they always treat you fairly. So you feel, yeah, this person is honest. So for example, if there is a cake available, they will give you a share of the cake. They won't keep it for themselves. Otherwise, that would be selfish. Am I making sense? These are the kind of things children learn from a very young age from a family. There are other things as well. How to be kind, how to be a member of a team, because a family is a team. If somebody is sick, everybody's going to help out. Otherwise, the person, does not get better very, very quickly. So there are loads of things that family teaches, and the way I would say you need to use your family is structure it in such a way that all these things automatically become part and parcel of your children's value base, so that they can become good for themselves, good for their relationships, good for people around them. And family is one of the biggest contributors to people's success and happiness. Now, happiness is something we haven't talked about here, but I want to quickly say that the research, again, done by Harvard, actually shows that you can help your children develop happiness habits. Yeah, and there are 6 of them. Once they learn the happiness habits, it actually enhances their ability to actually maintain happiness when they are both, especially when they do degrees and things like that, and especially in their life. And generally, they found that if your children are happy, generally they get paid 20% more than the average person, which is a good amount. Now, from my point of view, I've covered all the things I promised to do for you today. So the 3 things basically are, the first one basically is how to become responsible. The second one is how you build confidence. And the third one is how a family helps you become successful in your life. And we've gone into it in a lot more detail. Right? Now, ask me questions if you have any, and tell me if these are the sort of things that would be valuable to you as a person. I will start winding it up now. And now there is one question I want to ask you. One question I want to ask everyone. If I were to ask you, can you please tell me what job do you think your child will do when they've grown up? What answer do you think you'll give me? And what I'm going to tell you is going to surprise you. Big surprise. Okay, so what job do you think your child will do? Will they become an engineer? Will they become a doctor? Will they become an accountant? What do you think they will actually do? What I'm going to tell you is that any answer you give will be wrong. And the reason for that is that the economy of all the countries is changing so much, and the technology is changing so much, that anything we say today, all the jobs that are currently going, will all be redundant by the time our children are grown up. So really, we don't know what jobs our children are going to be doing. What we are doing is we are preparing our children to do the best they can and become the best they can be, so that they get a job in line with the skills they've got. So the stuff we are doing today and the stuff I've done in the past is just to help you get your children to that level. And obviously, we want the best for our children because we want them to have a better house, better health, better education, better of everything, better facilities. And the world is going to become like that, except we don't know what jobs people will be doing. Because even the jobs that are currently available in a place like where I am, UK, totally in my lifetime, just totally changed. An accountant doesn't do the job the way it was done 50 years ago, or 30 years ago, 20 years ago. A psychologist doesn't do the job the way it was done when I was trained. So what I would say to you is that in order to help your children, you have 3 choices. You just trust what is going on in your life. Yeah. The other thing you can potentially do is you can learn from like these type of courses. And you know what to do, that you need to build the child's responsibility, you need to build the child's confidence, you need to build the child, or use the family to actually enhance the child's capacity to become successful. You can learn things like that. Or the third way to do it is, if you want to do it very systematically, book a time with me, and we will devise a strategy together of how to do it. And if you want to, I can actually teach you how to do it, but for that, I just charge a fee for it. Okay, so these are the 3 options you've got. So basically, if you want to book a time, just put your name down on the WhatsApp chat, and I can actually set up a meeting with you to work out what to do next with your child. Okay, so I'm going to close it now unless people have got any questions. Are there any last minute questions that anybody want to ask me?